Can you describe to me exactly what area I'm looking at?
This is this west bank of the city of New Orleans with the suburb of Belchase here. We're going to depart out of here and go southeast to parallel the Mississippi River to the Bird's Foot, or the head of the passes. And we're going to overfly the site right here, which is basically about right here.
That's ground zero.
Ground zero. From there, we'll come back around and catch the Bird's Foot here. We're going to fly the coastline to where we have some islands that are being rebuilt and revitalized. There also is a dredging project on one of these islands here. We're going to circle the Barataria estuary area, bay area here, which has had a lot of oil, and on some of the bird rookeries, we'll circle this area here, and then from there we'll proceed back into the New Orleans area.
Y'all ready? I'm ready.
You know, I think it's important to get a first-hand look at what's happening, and I'd like to see what the blowout looks like now, the site of the blowout. I was there a few weeks ago, and it was bad then. I also want to see what it looks like around Grand Isle, which seems to be the place in the Gulf that's hit worst right now. But I don't really like relying entirely on news reports, and I have a different kind of an eye for the wildlife and the marsh, so I think it's really important for me to get a first-hand look if I'm going to have anything much to say about it. We flew out right over ground zero, right over the blowout, and right over these rigs that are trying to drill these relief wells. And it looks as though you took the ocean and you just emptied a giant pan of used motor oil on top of it. As far as you could see, not just streaks of oil, but I mean the surface of the ocean is pretty much coated with oil for many miles. And we were coming sort of in and out of the clouds. The sun was shimmering on the water, but you could see by the streaks that it was an almost unbroken coating of oil for many miles. It's a little discouraging after working in conservation for my entire career to see that something like this is still even possible. Then it broke up a little bit as we got near shore. Now I'm talking about tens of miles different. But then approaching shore, it got heavy again with big brown blobs and a lot of those sheeny streaks.
From my perspective, just operating the camera, I saw these big, what appeared to be plumes of oil, huge.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me, what were those?
The things that look like big plumes of oil are big plumes of oil, and the oil is at different densities. There are some really thick blobs that are like the consistency of peanut butter. But then there are these thick anacondas of oil that are also snaking their way across the surface. And then surrounding all of that is much thinner oil. Partly it's just the thick oil is breaking up, partly it's that the currents and the wind are coagulating some of the oil. So it's not just an even mat. There are certainly places where it's much thicker and other places where it's much lighter. And those places look different. They have different coloration to them, so that's how you can see. The idea that there are not plumes of oil below the surface is patently absurd because the dispersant is exactly designed to keep the oil below the surface. And they've thrown 1 million gallons of toxic dispersant in the water just so the oil doesn't get to the surface. The dispersant doesn't make the oil go away. It keeps it down, and it dissolves it into finer particles, but it's all there, so of course there are plumes of oil there. The independent scientists have detected it, the government has confirmed it, and BP's denial is simply dishonest. Their strategy has been keep the oil below the surface, and now they're trying to say there isn't any oil below the surface. And then right along the beach, a dark band of really, really dirty water. In fact, a lot of it looked like it was more oil than water in a ribbon along the shore at Grand Isle, Louisiana, where we are now. I think it's really important to think about what it means in the big picture. We've had for 30 years a culture of deregulation, a culture that seems to devalue the idea that government is here to protect the interests of most of us from the narrower, more immediate interests of just a few people, like the big oil companies that are mostly concerned with their profit. And we've had very lax oversight. There was obviously no plan, no preparedness. They don't even have the equipment to deal at this scale. But that is not just their fault, although I fault them for all of that. But it's also our fault for allowing a culture of deregulation, and also for allowing for 30 years the government to not create for us, because we haven't demanded that the government create for us, alternative sources of energy that we can use. The wind and the sun and the tides and the heat of the earth that actually power the planet and are clean and eternal are the things we need to be harnessing. And we have insisted on looking the other way. And this is really a consequence of that. So while I do blame them and I do fault them for their lack of preparedness and for trying to hurry it up and for being concerned only about their profits, in a sense, in a very real sense, we've really allowed this to happen.
What should the government do right now to clean this up? I mean, what can we do right now? What should happen?
Unfortunately, in this country, we put the oil company in charge of cleaning up. Putting the oil company in charge of cleaning up is a little bit like putting the rapist in charge of the abortion. In other countries, they don't do that. The oil company's interest is not the same as the public's interest. One thing that the government must do immediately is demand total transparency and absolute access by the public to all of this. Every one of us who has been down here for even a few days has been turned away from places, has had hassles with the cops and the sheriff departments, has been told that BP doesn't want cameras around. Well, BP had a permit to drill a hole in the seafloor. They did not have a permit to pollute the Gulf of Mexico. Now that they have a responsibility to clean it up, but I really think that their responsibility should end at their wallet. They should pay, and pay, but it should be the national responsibility, the federal responsibility to actually mobilize all these consulting firms and keep the public well informed and keep the public eye on things.